Hi, everyone. I have here one of my favorite breakfasts, blueberry muffins. I'm not just pointing out how delicious they are. I also want to discuss one of my favorite aspects of engineering that I can use every day. I love blueberry muffins as a quick and easy breakfast, but store-bought ones sometimes aren't as tall and fluffy as I'd like. The easiest way to fix this is to make my own. My training as an engineer told me I had to test just one ingredient at a time in my recipe to find what would make the muffin tall and fluffy. In other words, I had to isolate a variable. I figured out that baking powder reacts with water to make tiny bubbles in the dough. The more baking powder in the recipe, the higher the muffins will rise. So I decided to isolate the variable of baking powder. We call something, in this case baking powder, a variable because we vary or change the amount we put into each recipe. But the amount of baking powder was the only thing that changed in each batch. We make sure to keep everything else the same, like temperature and cooking time, so that we know the varied amounts of baking powder should be the only reason for the differences in muffins. I ran my test, that is, I baked my muffins, and now I have to analyze my data. I made 3 batches of muffins. Here, I used 5 grams of baking powder. Its final height is 1 centimeter, barely above the pan, exactly the way I don't like. Not enough baking powder for me. The second batch had 10 grams of baking powder and rose up to 3 centimeters, a pretty good height above the pan. Getting better, right? I added 15 grams of baking powder to the final batch. These were not much higher, but they flowed over the pan. Not ideal for breakfast on the go. So, based on these test results, I now use 10 grams to make my morning blueberry muffins. Isolating variables is a technique engineers use all the time. When they change just one thing at a time, engineers can see how each variable affects the whole design, and then narrow in on the best result. Remember to make sure you're isolating one and just one variable. Ask yourself, am I testing just the baking powder?